One of the uncertainties we all know for this interesting year, 2024, is geopolitics and how it's related to both the internal political agendas of different countries and their interactions. When you are looking at our topic today, the state of Chinese economy, recharging growth, how are you looking at it from where you are, Mr. Ambassador?
I'm a China analyst. I'm not representing a government here. That's my day job. I'm here at Davos having a conversation as best I can analyse the questions that we are confronting.
Yeah.
But I've never really accepted the thesis that you see written in various parts of the world about peak China, that somehow the Chinese economy is peaking, slowing, and then heading towards something worse. And the reason I analyse it in those terms is because you don't have to have been to China hundreds of times over 40 years to conclude that the Chinese consumer is the best guarantor of China's economic future. So long as the Chinese consumer has confidence in the future, then the economy will continue to grow reasonably well. That's a core fact. And remember, the scale of the Chinese consumer market is unprecedented in global economic history.
China's economy is not headed for permanently slower growth, says former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, who reckons Chinese consumers and businesses can drive faster expansion if they get their mojo back. But Mr. Rudd also warned that geopolitics could pull the floor from underneath China's growth model if the recent détente between the United States and China did not last. His comments at the World Economic Forum in Davos came after China reported 5.2% growth for 2023, an improvement on the previous year's 3% but well short of the pace it has maintained for much of the past 3 decades. A combination of lackluster exports, property market ructions and sagging infrastructure investment have kept China's economy in check, prompting some analysts to ask if the country has entered a new era of slower growth. But Mr. Rudd, who said he was speaking at Davos in a personal capacity rather than in his day job as Australia's ambassador to the US, rejected the idea that China's economy was peaking or permanently slowing. He said the untapped potential of Chinese consumer demand, which increased 7% last year, was the best guarantor of China's economic future. The Chinese consumer has had a rough time in recent years, he said, pointing to slow wages growth, youth unemployment, and many people's losses on the property and equity markets. The key question for the future is the restoration of Chinese domestic consumer confidence, because that is China's best long-term guarantee and it lies at the heart of Chinese economic policy. Mr. Rudd suggested Beijing needed to look at wages policy, tax policy, and welfare provision to help rekindle consumer confidence. The other plank of Chinese growth was its private sector, which was driving the country's innovation and job creation. But Chinese business confidence has taken a battering in recent years as well as a result of perceptions Beijing was favoring the state-owned sector over the private sector. Mr. Rudd said President Xi Jinping's administration needed to de-emphasize ideology and re-emphasize the core question of the normal profit incentives for businesses operating in a market economy, an implicit critique of Mr. Xi's trenchant avowal of Marxism-Leninism. Title 1, Fragile Truce. He also said trade could help drive growth, but a souring of U.S.-China relations could bifurcate supply chains and put a handbrake on the Chinese economy. Mr. Xi and U.S. President Joe Biden had hit the pause button on geopolitics at their meeting in San Francisco last November, but what we don't know is how long the pause button will remain pressed. Is this a tactical shift over the next 12 months, and then we will revert to where we were in previous years, where geopolitics would undermine most elements of economic confidence and trade normality? Or will this become a longer-term shift, he asked. I hope it's the latter, but that is the core question in the entree of both Joe Biden and Xi Jinping today. Speaking on the same panel, London School of Economics professor Ke Eugene said trade between the US and China was still at the heart of the global economy, even if some of it was being rerouted through Vietnam and Mexico. Responding to Mr. Rudd, she also said restraints on Chinese consumption, such as potentially slowing wages growth, youth unemployment, and losses on the property and equity markets, could keep consumption in check. But Zhu Min, a former deputy boss of the International Monetary Fund who is now vice chairman of the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, said consumption was reasonably resilient and agreed with Mr. Rudd that it would drive growth. For him, the other factors that would prop up the Chinese economy were the digitization of manufacturing and the green energy transition. But he reckoned the growth rate would stabilize at about 4%. Dr. Jean said that even if China continued to grow at 3 to 4% and India expanded 4 percentage points faster, the sheer size of the Chinese economy meant it would still contribute $130 trillion $197 trillion more to global growth by 2030 than India would. Meanwhile, JP Morgan chief executive Jamie Dimon told CNBC in Davos that it had become more difficult to gauge the risk-reward equation in China. Still, he said, they're trying to make sure that they're open for business, that they're being fair to foreign companies, a point made by Premier Li Chang the previous day.
万事不求人，私人助理、私人顾问时代来临了。六度万事，万事相助，超强博士群不断奉献专项服务，信息、财经、健康、文娱、教育、旅游、消费、科技、美食，让您的生活品质全线升级。六度世界现在体验，请去3w.6度.world。
限时免费期间，全体注册网友免费使用付费版的高级功能如下：支持论坛搜索，免费画图。第一步，点击右上角最左边的机器人符号开始对话，像图片中红框中的那样。第二步，如图选择六度万事，我们未来将推出更多的 AI 供大家选择。然后就可以与六博士悄悄畅谈了。还支持论坛内部信息搜索哦。您还可以让六博士做你的助手，帮你绘制漂亮图片。最后可以点击添加好友进来，一起与六博士工作。一起来3w.6度.world尝试吧。